Hi, everyone. John Haldy here, and I am so excited that I've got Steve Crawford back for part two of our educational series to help new contractors get their bearings in this space. Steve, welcome.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm going to give you a chance to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself in a second, but I just wanted to let people know that the last conversation we had was all about trucks, how to get them into the system, all that kind of good stuff. If you haven't seen it, we'll provide a link here down below once we edit the video. But today our topic is drivers and how to get them. And I think it's going to be a great conversation. Steve and I have been looking forward to doing this. So thanks for being here. Steve, do you mind telling everybody a little bit about who you are and your background?
Okay, yeah, I'm one that really can say lifelong trucker. My dad had a trucking company. I worked with him. He took ill in high school while I was in high school, and so I started. When I got out of school, I went to work, and I've been once I graduated, I went to work, and I'm still working, and it's all pretty much. 95% of what I've done has been in transportation. I've tried a few other things. I always end up back here. Started my own business a little over 30 years ago. And obviously in trucking, been a FedEx ground contractor for 26 years and have really enjoyed it. It has its ups and downs, but I am wired to be an entrepreneur. Transportation is what I love. And as you said, last conversation was about trucks. Today it's about drivers. It's very simple. Our industry is trucks and drivers, drivers and trucks. And those two things have to be solved and managed and supervised, whatever, well, every day of the week.
I've heard it said from some folks that at the end of the day, a FedEx Linehaul Contractor is basically an outsourced staffing agency and a fleet manager. True or false?
Oh, I agree with that 100%. I have said many times that we're in the fulfillment business. They are contracting with us to fulfill the needs that they have for service. And part of that is the staffing. Fleet management, of course, would get back to the equipment. But yeah, staffing, we need to find the right people at the right time that can do the job that we need to have done.
So if it's all right with you, I'm gonna hit you with some questions because I want to validate or invalidate some things I've heard.
Okay, go ahead.
One of the things that strikes me is FedEx contracting is different from traditional trucking in that you already know you're getting freight. You don't have to have a marketing and sales department to go out and get good at finding the freight that you're going to haul, correct?
That is correct.
So to my untrained eye, that means that a FedEx contractor doesn't have marketing and sales typically as a core competency. But when I look at driver recruiting, it seems like you better be damn good at marketing and sales. You better be a Randy Curick of Spartan who just eats, sleeps, and breathes this stuff. Is that a fair point?
That really is. For many years, I have said that recruiting is nothing more than sales and marketing. I'm very fortunate in my background. I did spend a few years working with the Dale Carnegie courses as a salesman for them. And in part of my career, which is the reason that I became a contractor 30 years ago, 3 years prior to that, I was a recruiter for a company called Roberts Express. It's now FedEx Custom Critical. And so, yes, recruiting, getting the talent on board. If we don't have drivers, you can have all the trucks in the world. It doesn't do you any good.
So if I was a new contractor, how would you tell me to get my feet wet in trying to figure out getting drivers? I mean, let's pretend I just got awarded 5 contracts or I just bought 5 routes and I need to hire 3 drivers or 5 drivers in a hurry. Where do I even begin thinking about this?
Well, one of the things is that each route, each contractor, whatever, has their own unique individual, like somebody might have a team operation. It might be solo, is a lot of day work, night work, trailer spots, because you just say, I need a driver. Well, there's some drivers that are good at certain aspects. There's some drivers that aren't good at that. I've had drivers that were really good in the trailer spot line, P&D world part that were terrible in line haul and vice versa. So you got to understand the talent that you're looking for and what it is. I think for a new person, it's not that it's more difficult, but you have to be ready to invest some money. I helped a gentleman get started in a small market outside the area here, about 200 miles away. A few years ago, he was awarded some new business, had retired from a major corporation and had money to invest, wanted to start a business, and he chose FedEx as his option. But as he acquired his talent, he was able to put them on a salary because, like we're going to open in 2 weeks or we're going to open in 3 weeks. Well, nobody's going to wait around 2, 3, 4 weeks for a job when they can go to work somewhere else. So in this gentleman's particular case, he invested some money in some salaries so that he could hang on to the people to get him to the starting line. And when I spoke to him, and this is several months ago, he started with 5 drivers, and 4 of the 5 that he hired on that guarantee pay when he was first starting are still with him. And he said, and the 5th one that left was, a blessing in disguise that the guy left. He wasn't really the candidate that he needed, and he's been able to replace him successfully. So it's going to come with some blood, sweat, and tears. There's going to be a financial commitment that you have to make. And then in understanding your market, we have to take a look at, what are the ways for you to find a driver? And, we can talk some specific things about the sales and marketing aspect. Some recent research is that 75% of the drivers in America are content with the job that they have. So that means only 25% are looking, but 100% of us that have trucking companies are looking for those 25%. And maybe those 25%, there might be some people that really don't fit our organization. So there's this, in a way, a smaller and smaller market for a growing industry. And so we're competing with the big guys, we're competing with other local guys, whatever it might be. But so we have to be able to get our marketing plan, if you will. We keep saying that recruiting is sales and marketing. Then our marketing has to be, how can we target areas where drivers are that we can get them to pay attention to us?
It sounds a little daunting, because if I was a new contractor, I needed 3 drivers right away. Taking time to write a marketing plan seems like a long way to get to where I'm trying to get to, right? I just need 3 drivers.
Right. It can be overwhelming.
And when you say a marketing plan, are you literally talking about trying to write some sort of report, or are you just saying you need to have an approach where I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and then A, B, and C when this happens, and this is going to be the way I attack it, and this is going to be how I measure the effectiveness?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much that you have this written formal marketing plan, but you have to know what you're selling. When a driver calls up and says, hey, I saw that you're hiring, what do you have? I'm interested. Well, you want to be able to explain, I'm running teams, I have dedicated runs, I am looking for guys that are willing to run team, but we have unassigned runs, but we can expect to do this. I have solo runs, I have dedicated runs, solo, whatever they might be. You know what you have and know what you're working towards. And then, because you're basically selling that driver applicant on joining your team. They already know how to drive a truck. So you're not selling them on driving a truck. You're selling them on joining your team. So why should I join your team? You got to be ready to answer that question. Because we're a small company and we care about people, because we have good benefits, because you're home every day, whatever it might be. If all you want to do is drive a truck, there's thousands of places you can go to work in America. Why would you select my company? Why would you select any other FedEx ground contractor? We've got to be able to tell our story so that there's a compelling reason for that person to join our team.
In your experience, how much of that sales effort, whether it's in face-to-face or in print or digital, or however you're recruiting folks, how much of that is focused on your company versus selling them on driving for FedEx because it's no-touch freight and it's got sort of guaranteed miles and those kinds of things? Where's the balance? Because you're competing against all the other trucking companies out there, right?
Right.
So where do you differentiate? Is it specifically on your company individually, or is it more that driving for FedEx is a better thing, or a combination?
I would say in the information that we're giving out to the drivers that call us, or even in our advertising or whatever, it's probably between 80 and 90% about us.
Okay.
Certainly the FedEx name and brand name and everything, and everybody sees the trucks up there, and some people have good things to say about it and some people have bad things to say about it. I think most drivers understand that FedEx, you're going from point A to point B, we can tell, you got no touch freight and no, all drop and hook. And you can hear that line from a whole bunch of other trucking companies too. So, they'll take it for what it's worth. But coming to work for my company, we have really great benefits program. We got some really good not just, when I say benefits, not just the insurance, but some very great vacation pays, a pretty good sign-on bonus, referral bonus, things like that. And by the way, just there was an article in a trade publication, it's about a year ago though, that sign-on bonus was not even in the top 5 reasons why people change jobs. I thought that was pretty interesting.
When was that though?
It was about a year ago.
Okay, during COVID, during the mania. Okay. The one-time hit from getting the sign-up bonus isn't really going to get a long-term driver, is what they were saying.
Well, it's not in the top 5. It was like top maybe 5. Number 6 or 7.
Okay.
How am I being treated? What kind of truck do I drive? What's my quality of life? When will I get home to see my family? Things like that were more important.
Okay, cool. So let's say I've got to hire 2 drivers. One's a solo driver, one's a team driver, right? Or right. I need 2 team drivers. I need a team and I need solo. Is it as easy when I do advertisements, wherever I'm placing them, to just change the word solo to team and it's all the same things to emphasize? Or is it a different mindset of how to attract team drivers versus solo?
I think it's a different mindset. My recommendation would be to have 2 advertising, I don't know if you call it platforms or whatever, maybe you got to run a series of different ads. You could have in your ad, now hiring team and solo drivers, or if you had 2 separate ads, teams needed for this and solo needed for that. If I can use an example, if a hospital was hiring, we need to hire nurses. Well, maybe one is an ER nurse and another one is a maternity ward nurse. Well, those are 2 totally different types of jobs. They may want to market those separately so that you get the right applicant applying for the right job. And my view is that it takes a lot more work to hire team drivers than it does a solo driver. So when you advertise separately for that and somebody's responding to that, which sales cap you got to put on to talk to them about the benefits of why you should come to work for me in my team operation. And be prepared for, well, do you have any solo operations? Well, yes, we do, but we're trying to fill our teams first and then move on to that. You have to be prepared ahead of time to answer, you're just like, if this is me writing the script, I need to know what questions would I be asking? What would I ask myself about why I would come to work for me?
I heard someone tell me recently that their recruiting effort involves things like Indeed and Craigslist. It involves a Google ad strategy. It involves a Facebook ad strategy. They've got billboards. They've got a recruiting referral program for drivers who bring in other drivers. They've got business cards. They've got bumper stickers. They got all of this stuff. And it seemed overwhelming to me. I mean, yeah, that's great if you got 80 trucks and you got a staff to do all that. But how does someone with 10 trucks who needs 2 drivers approach it? Is there a place they should start, or should they just understand that they got to put things out there everywhere?
Well, I think they'd have to be careful of, if you do everything everywhere, it might be like trying to do too much, or maybe you're spreading yourself too thin, because you're going to have a budget for this. You're going to have an advertising budget, marketing budget, onboarding budget, whatever we want to call it. But for that type of smaller operation, I would recommend, first of all, and this is part of what I do, is in a discovery stage, if you want to call it that, take a look at the operation, just a real quick review. What are some of the numbers that you're coming up with? Because you got wages, you got fuel, you got your maintenance expense, benefits for the drivers, and there's a certain amount that's left over. How much of that amount that's left over can we allocate towards talent acquisition so that you have more that's left over once you do get the talent on board? And a 7-truck, like one of my operations that I have is a 7-truck operation in a small terminal where I'm the only line haul contractor there. And I sold my St. Louis business, but I had 13 routes there. But St. Louis is a huge market. So 7 trucks in a small market, 13 trucks in a big market. You got to approach these with, different angles, different strategies, I guess you could call it. And one of the things that's really good about the things that you were mentioning is that when you get to where you're selecting your communication method, you want to be able to target areas where drivers are. For example, you mentioned in Indeed. Indeed is great for letting 100% of the people know that there's 100% of the jobs available, but it doesn't go any further than that. Well, so if you spend a lot of money on Indeed and don't get many responses, it's because you're somewhat lost in the shuffle. And again, where I said earlier, only 25% of the people are looking for jobs. So only 25% are potentially looking at Indeed, but every trucking company in America is on Indeed.
Right.
That's why I'm not.
And I had a wonderful conversation recently with Mitch Adams of M3 Traffic, and we'll put a link to that video here in this video for those who are interested. But Mitch made a really interesting point, which is drivers who are looking for a job are on places like Indeed. But a lot of times you find drivers who aren't looking if you're out in Facebook, because that's a whole different advertising paradigm. That's when they're on Facebook doing other things, and Facebook is good at putting an ad in front of them. And if you can put the right ad copy in front of them or a picture, and they go, oh man, they're offering 75 cents a mile and I'm only getting 62 cents a mile, maybe I'll go look at that. But they weren't looking when they saw the ad. It's a different model, right?
I totally agree. And Mitch is one of my vendors. I work closely with him, and he helps me in my marketing plan for the drivers that we need. I would expand on that and say that, and again, it goes back to, as an employer, I think we provide something that's a good quality of life for the driver. So in one of these smaller markets, there's a driver that's driving a grain truck maybe that should be working for me, and he doesn't even know that I exist. And I don't know who he is because he's 30 or 40 miles away, which is not a problem. But it's he doesn't know me and I don't know him, and we're never going to meet on Indeed. But we may intersect on Facebook, or we may intersect on Google or something like that. And that's why this targeted digital type of advertising marketing, which Mitch does in the Facebook world, just does a fabulous job. That's where we have to look. That's where we have to be.
So let's get specific, because we're gearing these videos for folks who have just gotten into the FedEx Linehaul contracting space. Let's pretend that I'm coming to you for advice, and I just bought 5 runs with trucks, but they came with drivers, but 2 of the 5 drivers met me and said, they can't stand me. And they said, see, I'm going elsewhere. So now I got 2 trucks with no drivers. Where would you tell me to get started? How should I approach this?
My recommendation would be we need to understand 2 things. One, why would the driver want this job? Secondly, what kind of margins are you dealing with? And that's, like I was saying earlier about one of the things that I do. I use a term called contribution to overhead. After you take out those wages, benefits, fuel, and maintenance, there's X number of dollars left over per week. And every time that a truck is sitting and not running, those dollars are not coming in. And so I measure that. And that's what a new contractor would have to take a look at. If he bought a company, he's got some financial history, we should be able to take a look at those numbers. And like one number that's been tossed around, I think it might be a little bit low, is that it costs about $5,000 per driver to get somebody on board. And that might be a low number, but let's just use that. Well, if your margin, I'll make it easy for the math, if your margin, that contribution to overhead that I mentioned, if that's $1,250 a week, it only takes 4 weeks, a month, to come up with $5,000. So are you willing to invest 1 month's worth of margin so that you can get the 11 months by getting somebody in the seat? So you can't be foolish with your money, but you can't go cheap.
Makes sense, but I'm going to hold your feet to the fire a little, Steve.
Okay.
So I'm going to kick my high chair here and say, Steve, that's all great, well and good, margins and all this stuff, but I've done some homework, and I'm in a terminal with 7 other contractors. It's a big terminal, and I've looked at their ads, and they're advertising between 70 and 75 cents a mile for solo, and I need 2 solo drivers as an example. And on Monday, I'm going to start taking declines because I don't have anybody in the seat. Do I start blasting ads on Indeed first? Do I call in the pros, somebody like a Mitch Adams, to to help me figure this out in a hurry and get ads out there so that I can learn from their expertise right away. What's the game plan today to start advertising to fill the seats?
My answer would be is that the two things that have low rate of return, but they're very minimal investment, is get something out there on Indeed and Craigslist, but don't expect a lot. But again, don't go hide under a rock either. And then you get with Mitch on Facebook advertising. An affiliate that I have, a fellow named Brian, is really more into the digital talent acquisition, you could call it. A lot of Google advertising, tracking of where the best leads coming from. And the thing about both Brian and Mitch is you can target your advertising. I'm in the St. Louis area. If you advertise for truck drivers in one of the suburbs called Ladue, you're going to get 0 responses because truck drivers don't live in Ladue. And so that's what happens with Indeed and Craigslist. You're kind of like, throwing spaghetti at the wall and let's see how much sticks. You got to do a little bit of it because you might accidentally get somebody. But you want to go into that targeted thing. And again, like Facebook, somebody that may not be on Indeed. Hey, there's a job that's open in my area. Hey, there's home daily, good pay, whatever it might be. Because but I think the quick answer is get something going on Indeed and Craigslist, but you've got to get into that. And most of us are truck drivers when you get right down to it. Or if you're a businessman that's interested or have a background in finance, not a lot of us are highly trained in sales and marketing. Well, the Max or not Mitch, rather, I should say Mitch Adams and Brian Muncie that I mentioned are the pros on that. Be prepared to spend a little bit of money, but they can target the advertising, but that takes some time. It might take 2 to 4 weeks. I would make the recommendation if you're buying or starting an operation, invest a little bit of money in advertising before you even close the deal so that you're prepared. It's better to have somebody on the bench. Like baseball, you don't want to just have 25 people on the roster. You want to have a few people down in the minor leagues in case somebody gets hurt or doesn't show up. You can bring them up, be ready.
You can't be in this space without hearing from every corner that there's a massive driver shortage, right?
Right.
What are your views on that? Do you see it getting better, worse? How do we cope with that?
I don't know. When you say getting worse, for the longest time, right now, there are driving jobs that are not being filled. Many years ago, we always talked about that there was a driver shortage. Well, in that economy, and I'm going to say maybe it was anywhere from 5 to 10, 15 years ago, in that economy, there was too many trucks. There was, all the freight that needed to be moved was being moved, but there was no shelves that were bare in the store. Well, that's different today because of COVID and a lot of other things. At times you go to the different stores and you can't find what you want. It's not on the shelf. And some of it is supply chain related, which goes back to the driver. So
Steve, you're showing your age. Not many people are going to stores anymore. They're ordering online.
Okay.
That's part of the boom.
I don't add this gray. All right. I worked hard to get this. Okay. So you're buying your groceries online, you're buying whatever online. It still ends up being there is this driver shortage. And why would somebody leave a job that they're at, or if they're looking, again, goes back to why would they want to come to work for me? We've got to find those people. We have to be able to sell them, and by selling them means tell them. A way of looking at it is that if you want to break it down really small, as contractors using whatever marketing method that we have, we're trying to get a conversation. We need to be able to intersect with this person either on the phone or in person so that we can tell our story and move them ahead in the talent acquisition process. So even though, the ultimate goal, we need to have butts in the seat. Short-term goal, we need to have conversations.
Okay. There's a lot of talk about some companies offering these big sign-up bonuses, right?
Right.
Are you a fan of that?
Not really. And if you look at a lot of them, it's probably not fair to say that they're deceptive, but they're, hey, $10,000 sign-on bonus. Well, if you look at those companies, it's $2,500 a quarter and you got to stay a year. Well, okay, $2,500 a quarter, that's nothing to sneeze at, but help me out with the math at 1,300 or 13 weeks, $200 a week would be 2,600 bucks. So it's right in that number. Well, maybe my wage and benefits are way better than that sign-on bonus, and you start getting that right away. So again, if I'm a salesman, I've got to sell my story of why what I'm offering is the answer that you need, Mr. or Miss Driver, for what you're looking for.
So if there's a new contractor who either just bought or got assigned runs organically, and they literally have trucks sitting in the yard and nobody to drive them, do you think that it makes sense for them to offer an extremely aggressive cent per mile rate to try to attract people quickly?
It might. I think one of the things that we should replace it with, and this is, new people, old people, people have been around for a long time, maybe they're not even in the FedEx space, is what is your total compensation package? See, my wages are a little bit under what the average would be out there, but I have a very generous health insurance plan. We have a very generous vacation plan. And if you took it all into a, cents per mile, I'm beating the competition with that. There's some people out there on an ego trip that I'm making $22 an hour. Well, I make 24 bucks an hour. Well, but if the guy that's getting 22 bucks an hour has way better benefits, he may actually be yielding 26. So I'm the old guy, kind of ornery. If somebody can't figure out the math, I'm not sure I want them driving for me. We get right down to it. But we have to be able to show our entire compensation plan and how we treat people, what your work conditions are like, what type of equipment you drive. That's all part of this process of attracting the right person.
I've never heard someone say this, and I've always wondered why I haven't heard it. But it would seem to me that if you were really in a crunch and you needed a driver yesterday, that the mindset would be, I've got to put the best bait on the best lure on the line to get someone quickly, that it may make sense to offer an above market pay rate. And the reason, it just seems weird. Everybody assumes once you have a driver, the last thing you'd ever want to do is replace them and get rid of them. Nobody would fire a driver in this market except for cause. But I would think that someone who needs someone today could offer that and then immediately start their marketing engine and start to do things to advertise for a driver at a mid-market rate as opposed to way above market, with the goal of replacing someone that they're overpaying. But in the meantime, they had someone in the truck for a while, so at least they were getting the revenue in. Or is that just a dumb idea? Because I've had worse, but it may be.
Well, I'm not one to say that anything is a dumb idea. I think there's potentially some traps there. You get somebody on board, you don't want to be accused of bait and switch. I'm in Missouri. It's an at-will state, so you can dismiss somebody if you need to. But you might take some hits on your reputation that might not be worth the finances. I think you have to take a really hard look at the numbers and that what I'm offering, can I afford this? And you mentioned other contractors might be paying 70 cents and you're only paying 60 or something like that. But are those other guys just running themselves into bankruptcy? You don't know. Maybe they're hoping that, hey, I'm going to break even this year and maybe we're going to get a good rate increase next year. Don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure what the future rates are going to be. I'm not sure what the mindset of some of these other employers are. But I think, again, going back to, there's plenty of research you can do on Google. What is the average truck driver wage in, take a city, Indianapolis, Louisville, Nashville, Atlanta, St. Louis, Albuquerque, whatever. Understand what the going rates are out there, because you don't want to only look at what are other FedEx contractors paying. What is the market paying? And again, we might be finding a driver that's not necessarily looking. There's something about your ad. I've gone so far as like to say the ads that you could put with Mitch in Facebook when it says home daily. Maybe it's the spouse that sees that ad and says, hey, here's a job where you can be home every day instead of being gone 10 days at a time. That is of value to that family. They may not really care about the difference between 60 and 70 cents. Yeah, that's a lot of money. But if you can have your spouse at home instead of being gone all the time, again, that gets back to understanding what you are offering. And even in the case of like teams, you have to be gone, but we get this much miles per week and you can plan on making this much, and that you're going to be home on these days. It's that whole package that we're selling to the prospective driver to have them join our teams.
So shifting gears, but building on what you just said to understand this, I'm a tech guy. Marketing to me is kind of fuzzy black magic. I don't understand a lot of it, but it would seem to me that in your space, if you're having trouble recruiting drivers, how do you know if it's that the way you're recruiting them and the places you're looking for them is wrong, or the comp package and the things you're highlighting is wrong? I mean, how do you know if you're just way below market and nobody cares, even though you got great advertising? Or how do you know that you got good advertising in the right place? I'm sorry, terrible advertising in the right place, in the wrong place, but you've got a great package. And if people knew about it, they would actually care and want to sign up. How do you figure that out with recruiting?
I think the only way you figure any of that out is you have to do some tracking and you have to do some research. You've got to talk to other people and just say, hey, what are you paying? Like I said, I've been in this industry 50 years. I have learned a lot by going to others and being able to, in effect, say, what am I doing wrong? Maybe I don't take the approach that way, but just pay attention to what other people are doing. Be connected with your fellow contractors. And some of these big hubs, it's kind of hard. They're not maybe real cooperative people or anything like that. But I think, you're asking a data question, and the only way you can get an answer with using data is you got to gather the data. I think, if you know that the average driver in your building is earning $1,200 a week and you're only paying $900 a week, well, yeah, you're going to have a problem. That doesn't mean you have to go to $1,500 a week to solve the problem. You have to have a certain level of awareness. And again, the driver or the new contractor that bought an existing operation, he's already got payroll history. He should be able to take a look at and go to your drivers and just say, hey, and I learned this from somebody else. You want to be able to ask 4 questions: what's right, what's wrong, what's missing, and what's confused. And you got to talk to people. You got to gather that data.
I've also heard that market to market, there's big discrepancies that, and I don't know if this is true, but I'm going to use it as an example. In Charlotte, it may be 80 cents a mile and near impossible to hire a driver, and 60 miles away, 70 miles away in Mebane, North Carolina, it's 65 cents a mile and there's drivers galore. How do you get a sense for that? If you're only in one market, how do you get a sense for whether your life is easier or worse compared to others, or does it matter?
I think there's an awareness there. But if you chose to be in Charlotte, then you got to deal with Charlotte. And boy, it's nice that this is great over there. I don't know if this works or not, but many times I've told people, if you don't like the sight of blood, don't be a nurse. If you signed up for Charlotte, then you got to be the best answer that you can be for yourself in Charlotte. And I'm experiencing that right now. Getting drivers in Columbus, Ohio is way different challenge than getting them in Springfield, Missouri. And so I do in Columbus what I got to do in Columbus, and I do in Springfield what I got to do in Springfield.
It just is what it is, and that impacts the margin, and live with it.
Right.
Gotcha. Forgive me.
And that would be a whole, different topic for a different video or something like that. How do you increase your margins? How do you increase your utilization? Things like that. How does utilization impact bottom line? There's so many of those things that contribute to this whole thing. And that goes back to what you said about us being in the, like I put it, we're in the fulfillment business, that we're fleet managers and doing talent acquisition for FedEx. As you're doing that, part of the management is figure out how can I do more with the assets and resources that I already have.
I've heard the term data-driven, being data-driven, and I think you alluded to it. How much data are you collecting when you're doing your recruiting efforts? What are you tracking?
We track, and this is done for us by the 2 companies that we work with, how many views, how many clicks, and then how many conversations that we end up with. And then ultimately, how many drivers did we end up with? And then we also, as after the fact, I have taken a look at, okay, we've got this many new drivers. How many of them were referrals as opposed to they were they were sourced to us, if you want to call it, by some form of advertising.
And you track the dollar cost associated with those two?
In a macro sense, yes, not in a micro.
Okay.
Only because I'm not a real detailed person.
Okay. Because watching that video with Randy, I get the sense that Randy knows exactly what he's paying per click and that kind of thing.
Right. Well, yeah, and we have the, and again, that's provided to us, but we know how much it's costing per click, whatever there. But, you know, did that click come from Facebook or did that click come from Google? We're getting better at being able to understand that. And you know, and again, it goes back to it's going to cost you X number of dollars to bring a driver on board. So then you can even balance that out. Well, if I get a referral from an existing driver, am I better off paying him a significantly larger amount than what I've been doing? It's not that you get to eliminate your advertising, but you know, like if you're going to spend $5,000, you can spend it with Mitch and Facebook and, you know, Brian's company and whatnot. And you still have to do that. Or instead of giving your driver $1,000 for a referral, give him $1,500 or $2,000, because it's what happens after the hire. You now have somebody producing revenue, so they're making that contribution to the overhead, and that's where the money is.
I got it. So with a referral, you're basically paying a success fee, as opposed to with advertising, you may not have the success. It's just
Right.
a numbers game. Okay.
Right.
Some people espouse the notion that you should always be advertising, that you should always be recruiting, as opposed to waiting till you need a driver. Do you believe in that notion?
Oh yeah, and that's been my mantra for many, many, many years. If you wait until you have a problem, you're going to have an even bigger problem. You always know that you can call a fire department, but it's probably handy to have a hose and a fire extinguisher. And you have to have those in advance. You should never really stop advertising. And that's the nice thing about these digital platforms. You can increase it or decrease it, but just like your hose out in the garden, you never want to turn the faucet off all the way. You want to leave it on a little bit because you want to keep having your name out there. And things happen. Sad story, one of my drivers passed away this week from COVID. And so, you know, 2 months ago, if you and I would have had a conversation about this gentleman, it's like, hey, yeah, he's doing a great job. You know, his family's grieving. We're grieving as a company because we lost him. And now we have to replace him. You don't know when those things are going to happen. Somebody inherit, you know, grandma dies and they inherit money and I'm going to move to Florida or whatever. You just don't know when. You should have some track history, but a new contractor coming in has no history. But you've got to keep the pipeline filled, if you will, of people that you can talk to. And again, if you have a good story to tell, well, hey, we got a waiting list right now. And I can tell you that it has worked for me. We've had 2 people that inquired back in October and we weren't able to put things together with them back then, but we're putting things together with them now.
That's an interesting concept, because when you talked earlier about drivers who aren't actually looking for a job, but they might see a Facebook ad and go, oh, that's interesting. Would you be recruiting to tell people, look, we don't have an opening today, but the moment we do you want us to call you? I mean, do you work it like that?
Yeah, that's an additional step in your marketing plan for talent acquisition, is the way I guess you'd have to put it. And again, it goes back to having that compelling story. They've got to want to join your team. So it's like, yeah, hey, you know, yeah, call me back when you got an opening. This is what I want to do.
I'm just curious because I believe in the bell curve and I want to see if it's real. About how many drivers do you have?
I'm going to say 35.
And statistically, I would guess that you could probably off the top of your head name 3 of them. I won't ask you to, who if you saw the back of them, you wouldn't be losing sleep.
Yeah, there's some truth to that.
Okay. So another reason to maybe always be looking, because you never know when 1 or 2 drivers are just going to be in a mood and walk away, or just be calling off and you can't get them to work and whatever. And it wouldn't be the worst thing to replace them.
Right. In other industries, and I got another friend that he was in talent acquisition for a big medical company, and they were always recruiting because they had it with their line managers and whatnot. Who are your top performers, bottom performers, and always look at, are there ways to move these bottom performers out? Well, there's a balance between results and relationships, and I like having good relationships. So, gosh, you don't want to just come along and fire somebody because I'm just going to fire you. But again, yeah, we should, again, data driven. I know which drivers are producing the best yield percentage, whatever, and that contribution for overhead, which ones are calling off. Another one part, this is subjective. There's, you can't measure it, but my company is a drama-free work zone. And so you got some drivers that just live constantly with drama, and that's the old bad apple spoils the others. You run into that. So yeah, that is one more reason to keep recruiting, because you don't know when the unknown is going to happen. And you always want to be looking at, can I upgrade my talent by adding somebody?
We haven't mentioned it, but FedEx has an interesting thing that everyone has to deal with, which is the First Advantage system, right?
Right.
I will say, for those watching, it should be coming out before you've seen this. There's another video with Ed Trout of CSP Resources, who has a business wholly focused on getting people through First Advantage quickly and successfully. So if you're interested in that, watch that. But without going too deep down the rabbit hole, how does First Advantage impact your recruiting strategy? Because it's not like you can tell a guy, hey, great, I'm going to hire you. You start tomorrow, be here at 8 a.m. You're in the truck, because you have this intermediate process to get them into the FedEx system, right?
Right. So
what does that do for your recruiting plan, your tactics?
Well, from our aspect, we have to be aware of what the process is. So when we talk to somebody that's a lead and they say they want to apply, then the email is sent to them. We need to monitor it on our end. So did they actually apply? One of the things, I may have mentioned this earlier, but once we have somebody identified as a potential candidate and then actually getting them in the truck, and this is true for any customer acquisition or driver acquisition, whatever you want to call it. There's exit ramps. You could talk to an insurance agent. Yeah, I'm kind of interested in that, but I found a better price somewhere else, or buying a car or whatever. There's always an exit ramp to not fulfill the deal. And First Advantage kind of creates those exit ramps for us. So one of the things that we do is we monitor, hey, have you got that application filled out yet? And if guys say, yeah, send it to me, but I'm not going to be home for a day or two. Well, if a week or two has gone by and we're calling him back and he hasn't filled out the application, well, now we're dealing with human nature. Rather than say, no, I'm not interested in that job, some people will just say, yeah, go ahead and send me an application, I'll fill it out. So you got to be able to filter out those behavior type things. But back to, like you mentioned about Randy, he has so many things down in details. All these steps of what somebody has to do to get through First Advantage. What is their job history? They got to get their medical card submitted. They got to submit a copy of their driver's license, get the MVR, get a drug test. Like you said, none of us are, we're kind of generalists. We do a lot of stuff within transportation. We got to be able to focus on those steps that I just mentioned. And Ed is a great resource. I use Ed's, I'm one of his customers. He's one of my vendors. And that is a great solution because, again, it's management of data, management of detail. And if you just wait for the process to happen, there's your exit ramp I was talking about.
Do you experience situations where you've got a qualified driver who would be a great candidate? You've paid all this money to get them on the hook, so to speak, and they wander away because they can't wait 3 weeks for First Advantage to clear them?
That does happen. And the way that we have solved it, when we know that there's somebody that, this person can make it, and but there's going to be some kind of a delay, I put them on a payroll. I can pay the driver $1,000, or I can pay Mitch $1,000, or I can pay Facebook $1,000. It's not like I'm really ultra wealthy and can just give money away all the time. But if you've got the candidate that that you want to add to your team, if you got to pay a week or two worth of wages, And I think a good number, everybody should know that this is for the experienced contractor. The new guys will not have this data yet. But how long, what is your average retention? How long, I've got guys that have been with me 7 or 8 years, and we've got people that we just hired, 2-3 weeks ago. But what is your average? What is your expected, okay, I hire a guy and he's going to be here at least 3 years. Well, the mistake that some of us have made is we look at, I have this $2,000 spending right now. Well, that $2,000 is going to get you a driver for 36 months. That's kind of a drop in the bucket. So we have to have that global, you got to be looking at it from a micro standpoint and a macro standpoint.
What would you say is the average life expectancy is not the right word, but length of tenure for a line haul contractor? What's the average for how long the driver stays with them once they're hired?
Boy, that's a good question. I could probably really only answer for myself. And we're probably at about 3.5 or 4 years, but some of that is because of its growth. The ones that are newer is because of operations that we weren't doing 3 or 4 years ago. I had lunch with a contractor in Columbus this week who runs teams, and he's had people that's been with him 15 to 20 years. He thinks his average is that between 10 and 12 years. So, wow. But very similar though, if he's got 20 drivers right now, he needs 3 or 4 of them. It's most of us aren't like, I've got 20 trucks and I need 20 drivers. It's like, I've got 20 trucks and I need 4 or 5 drivers. But the economics of it, and again, this is one of the things that I look at for my clients, is that what is the cost, what is the drain on your finances of not having a driver? Because if you got a truck sitting and it's not bringing a return on investment, it's got a loan at the bank and you're paying for insurance and base plates, you're not taking profits off of your other trucks to pay for this non-producing asset. And that, so like you say, a bell curve, that's a very interesting bell curve. It probably takes 2.5 to 3 trucks to support one truck not working.
Yeah, it's very similar to rental properties. I know a little bit about that. And if you've got 10 apartments that you're trying to rent, if one of them's vacant, it's not producing any revenue.
Right.
So what's it costing you to have it off the market? And do you need to spend the money to ramp up the advertising to put a tenant in that apartment? Because until you do, it's just like a truck that's sitting in the yard doing nothing, but you're still making payments on it. You're still maintaining it. And you're still insuring it, right?
Right. And I've talked to people that are in that industry and, the rental properties and whatnot. And so what is your occupancy rate? 87%, 72%, 98%. Hotels are the same way. You go to a lot of hotels and they're full. And I was traveling this week and there was no problem getting a room anywhere. But the big hotel companies can tell you right down to the individual properties, we average 86% or 68% or whatever it is. We as contractors are probably not going to have 100% of our trucks running 100% of the time, but we should know. And the way I measure that is that if I have X number of trucks and I should be able to get Y amount of revenue, then I should be able to do Z for the week. And using your tool that you have, John, that gives me a weekly report and I keep it in a spreadsheet and we just go back and what's our average per week and right down to what is the average per driver, what is the yield, the margin per driver. We need to know those kind of things because, if I'm going to hire a driver, I need to put them in the right place at the right time.
Do larger contractors literally keep an extra driver or 2 on payroll and amortize that across all the other trucks so that if they need to, they can get them to where they need to be and keep the truck rolling and the revenue coming?
You have to. First of all, again, my company, we have a very generous vacation policy and it's paid time off and whatnot. And so average driver with me gets 3 weeks a year off. If you got 10 drivers, that's 30 weeks. Well, there's 60% of the year that you need a driver to cover vacations. Peak for us, is such a moving target these days, but there's certainly at least 4 to maybe 8 or 12 weeks where FedEx is so busy that having an extra driver, they can keep you going. Well, let's just say that's 10 weeks. Okay, well, now you got 40 weeks, you got 30 for vacations, 10 for extra business. 40 weeks out of 50, 80% of the time, that extra person that you have is doing something, contributing to the company. The other 20%, you probably just go out and hustle. You call FedEx somewhere and say, hey, you got any extra? I got an extra driver this week. You got anything? The majority of the time, you'll get something. And again, if you cut anything that contributes to the overhead to lower what your weekly or monthly requirement is, the lower you push that down, the more margin you have.
Gotcha.
And if I can, a former, well, when I say a former, it was he's still here at FedEx St. Louis. He used to work for UPS. When he was at the UPS building here in St. Louis, they hire at 110%. So if they need 100 drivers, they have 110. Right now, I'm doing it actually at 113. If I said I have this many routes, I got to cover this much, is that many people, then I'm at 113% is what I hire.
Steve, we're starting to push against the time we had allotted, and I want to be respectful of your time because I know you're busy. What have I forgotten to ask you that you think is important that we should have talked about?
I don't know if we've really forgotten anything. I think for the viewer, we've talked a lot about, the new people coming on board. What you and I have discussed is equally important for the existing contractor, because there is a driver shortage across the board. There's a need across the board. And I think it's probably not so much that we missed anything, but the highlights is what we constantly need to be telling our story. We need to understand our story, and we have to keep our name out there. We talked about the advertising, but never stop advertising. You may speed it up a little bit, you may throttle back a little bit, but we always want to be, we live in a world today where we always will be looking for talent. And one thing I could say, it's not so much that we missed this. I think it's important to acknowledge how things are different. When I was in high school, which is back in the 70s, you went and got whether you go to college or not, you get on with a good company and you're going to work there 40 years and have a retirement and a pension and a gold watch. And those days are gone. And so people, I've just read, and I'm going to say it's within the last 24 months, but the average 18-year-old today is going to have 11 jobs by the time they're 40. If I would have told my dad that back in the 70s, that by the time I'm 40, I'm going to have 11 different jobs, he'd have kicked my butt. And that's the way it is today. So it's different. So we need to constantly be looking for talent, because the technology that's advancing things ahead makes it possible for the advertising. Then the guys that are actually working for us can look at, hey, I'm getting ready to retire and I see there's an opening in Florida. I'm going to take this job, and boom, he's gone and we got to replace him. So I'm really big on the fact that we have to live like it's 2022, not 1992.
Steve, thank you. A million thanks for doing this today. We talked today about how to get drivers, and I think our part 3 in the series is going to be about how to keep them, right?
That's right.
So for those who are interested, the next one is going to be about team culture and benefits and packages and all the other stuff that goes into keeping your drivers, so that you can have drivers who've been there for 14 years and are still happy. For those who don't know, just a quick sign off, we're going to put Steve and my contact info. We would love to hear from you. If you have questions, concerns, suggestions on what we should be talking about, we're all ears. Steve, you're going to be at the Linehaul Summit in July, right?
That is correct.
So the Linehaul Summit, we'll put the information there, is a 2-day Linehaul contractor only conference. It should be a phenomenal educational opportunity. Haldy Tech is helping to put that together. We're very proud to be part of that effort. And Steve will be there. You get a chance to meet him, talk to him, lots of break times for that. And he'll be presenting, I'm sure, in a few different sessions. And we have a Facebook group, which, Steve, you're on that too, right?
Yes.
So another way to reach out to Steve besides email and phone is to be in the FedEx Ground Linehaul Contractors group. We'll put that link in there. There's great conversations going there. It's a great resource for asking questions and getting help from your fellow contractors. So Steve, thank you so much, and look forward to doing this again soon.
You bet. It'll be great. Have a good weekend. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.